Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. We're joined by the Treasurer of the State of California. His name is Bill Lockyer. And sir, I thank you for joining us again.
Thanks,
I want to speak with you about the state budget. You are at some level the watchdog of the figures coming in and out of the legislature and the governor's office. The governor has said that the budget is in balance, that we may even be in the black. Believable?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, the remarkable thing is it's gone from huge structural deficits 4 or 5 years ago now to basically being a balanced budget.
How?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of cuts that were made over those years.
Right.
It was hard for the governor and the legislature to do that. They did.
Right.
And a little bit of improvement in the economy. And of course, the voters passed Proposition 30 that brought in additional tax revenue. So the combination of the three.
But as we look forward, is this balanced budget and or being in the black sustainable?
Well, as far as you can reasonably project, so long as there's not a real tanking of the economy, or, which we don't expect, but if it happened, then you'd have a different outcome. Or if the legislature and governor decided to spend a huge amount that doesn't make sense.
Are you fearful for that?
No.
Given, well, but let me ask, there's 2/3 supermajority by Democrats. The rap is Democrats are spenders. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the rap. Are you fearful?
Well, the Democrats have a much deeper commitment to what government needs to do than the Republicans that think basically people are self-reliant and they'll take care of their needs without government. So if it's healthcare, public safety, environmental work, and mostly schools, generally Democrats have more enthusiasm for funding those things as a general rule. But they also know they've got a balanced budget, and they got a guy, the governor, who's saying it's going to be balanced, don't send me a bunch of spending.
Let me ask you about the debt, because that is really right in your bailiwick. I mean, that's what you deal with as the treasurer. It depends who you speak with. Some feel as if the governor's budget for 2013 and 14 deals with debt well, because we still do have a mountain of debt. Is that fair? But others feel as if he hasn't paid off enough.
Well, it's sort of fashionable to talk about debt, particularly at the national level. Now, if you talk about the state of California, you know, some say, well, gee, we're the next Greece.
Right, I've heard people say that.
Okay, now Greece's debt is 160% of their budget. Ours is 4%. It doesn't, you know, Greece's structural deficit is 9% of their economy. Ours is 0.2% of our economy. So the comparison just doesn't make sense. Now, there's a limit. I mean, when you add to the credit card, you can't make a new purchase. And so we have to be careful about that. But the unmet needs are huge for transportation facilities, for school facilities. We have a lot. We have a, well, that's not that's not a debt payment mostly.
Fair enough.
Unless you build a hospital or something. But so these other things, though, there's a big need. Probably a couple $100 billion of need in the next 15 years, and there's no way we can finance that in the traditional way, which is government obligation bonds and public debt, which is partly why we talk about things like toll roads and other ways to try to make up the difference.
When we come back, I want to speak with you about another type of debt. It's known as a capital appreciation bond. It's used by school districts. You have some concerns about them, and I want to speak about that when we come back. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our viewers on the California channel, we'll be right back. Welcome back, Treasurer. I want to speak with you about capital appreciation bonds. They're used by school districts. It's a lofty title. What do they mean?
Well, they really are like a balloon payment. So you don't pay any interest on your bond, and it compounds for a lot of years until eventually springs and you owe all that debt. And
so it's the reverse of interest-only home loans.
It's
is that fair?
Well, it's it's like postponing the interest and the principal.
That's the problem.
For a lot of years, and then you have this balloon.
How severe is the postponement? I heard a story on NPR I mentioned to you. Some of these figures are just staggering.
Well, when we borrow, sort of rule of thumb is you don't want to pay more than 2 or 3% or times what you borrowed.
Right.
So you borrow.
Even that seems high to me.
It does.
Okay.
But you buy a house or a car, you'll find you're paying twice the price of it. Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I don't want to know.
Okay, now there are school districts that have borrowed almost 100 times.
Literally?
Yes.
In California?
Yes, and it's absurd.
How is that possible?
Well, technically, you can do it.
It's legal?
Yes.
It's a payday loan, as you said. That's your metaphor, not mine.
It's like
I'm going to steal it.
It's like a payday loan. It's like street interest rates. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And it really, I understand why they do it. They're bumping into ceilings on debt borrowing locally. There's various constraints. And so they say, well, here, we can go to the voters and say, you're going to get the new school and you won't have to pay for it until your grandkids do.
Right.
Well, it's irresponsible.
Can you refinance these capital appreciation
Generally
bonds?
not.
Prepayment penalties?
No, you can't prepay them.
So yes, prepayment penalty.
Yeah, well, you just can't do it. And so that's in 2/3 of the cases. There's a few where you can, but generally you can't.
So what can be done about this?
Well, the legislature is actively talking about Assemblyman Hueso, Assemblywoman Buchanan, and others about putting new rules in place. So if you do this, where you're in effect assuming that your local property is going to increase in assessed value and we can pay it off more easily some future date, that there's some cap on that, that maybe you can only borrow 3 or 4 times the debt of what you borrow, or only a certain number of years, 25.
And the state
make them refinanceable.
The state can do that.
Yes.
This is constitutional, legal.
Yes.
So where do we stand? I mean, is this something that we need a lot of force behind it? The Superintendent of Public Instruction, yourself, the governor. I mean, how important is this, and how hard will it be to get
those
through?
people all support reform. And so I think the sentiment is good right now. The people that have peddled these things, I think that frankly have financial interests in districts doing it. Many of them are kind of financial advisors and others. They're kind of embarrassed by the deals they've made. Some try to defend them. But
is there anything that can be done to remedy the bad deals of the past? No. I mean, they're in place. It would just have to be through the grace of the lender.
They've sold the bonds. I mean, why wouldn't someone want to buy, for example, you borrow $5,000, an investor, you get back $150,000?
So
why would anyone make that kind of a deal?
But not even...
And you can't undo it. It's already sold to that investor.
The bondholder couldn't, through their grace, change it?
Well, through their grace,
yeah,
sure.
but essentially, it just, this is it.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen for these school districts?
Well, they're going to have a big tab. You know, if you're a district that borrowed $90 million and eventually owes back $1 billion,
that's bankruptcy. That's an answer for bankruptcy.
No, it means your property taxes in that district are going to skyrocket someday.
Can they?
Yes. Yes. This is exempt from Prop 13 caps. So they can get layered on. Now, I think people will resent it. In some of those districts, they're starting to find out, and board members are saying, well, we didn't know that was the deal. That there weren't adequate disclosures made in their view. And so reforms are needed, and I think we're going to make them.
Okay. His name is Bill Lockyer. He is the Treasurer of the State of California. My name is Brad Pomerance. We want to thank you so much for watching California Edition. We'll be right back.
Since 2007, what percentage of California school districts have taken out capital appreciation bonds? 5%, 10%, 20%, or 25%? According to an analysis by the Los Angeles Times, roughly 1/5 or 20% of the state's school districts have turned to capital appreciation bonds since 2007.
It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Mimi Walters, member of the California State Senate. And ma'am, I want to speak with you about the redistricting process and the results of it. Every 10 years, we draw new lines, and new members get elected in new districts, but old members still represent old number districts, but that can result in some areas having no representation?
That's correct. And this only happens in the Senate because senators get elected every 4 years. Right. So you have a 2-year period where you have some cities that aren't represented until a new senator gets elected in that district.
And that happens to happen in the communities you have represented.
That's correct. I am in Orange County.
Right.
And for example, my district, I was in District 33.
Right.
My new district number is 37.
You were just re-elected?
Yes, I was just re-elected to the 37th
new district.
And what happened was some of my cities changed in that new district.
Right.
I lost the southern portion. Cities like Laguna Hills, Laguna Niguel, Mission Viejo, Aliso Viejo, Coto de Caza. And my district went from being mostly inland to now the coast.
Right.
So I picked up Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, and parts of Huntington Beach.
Got it.
So that's kind of the change.
So you had to move, actually.
Yes,
to be in your new district, even though you represented significant portions of that new district,
right.
Your actual home happened not to be in the new district.
Correct.
But the interesting anomaly is that those old cities that you had, or cities that you formerly had, have no representation.
That's correct.
At this moment.
Right.
Because their new district doesn't come into play until 2014.
That's right.
So who represents them? Someone has to.
Well, what's going to happen is the Rules Committee is going to make a decision on which legislators will represent which cities.
I see.
So, for example, I've requested to represent some of the cities, and Rules Committee hopefully will give me Laguna Hills, Laguna Niguel, and Aliso Viejo.
You represented them before.
Exactly.
No reason not to continue representing
exactly.
them.
I asked for actually more cities, but they're only going to limit me to just a few.
So who will get the other cities? Is it a member nearby, I would presume?
Right. It will be, in this case, it will be Mark Weiland, because his district, which he's term limited in 2014, but his district is the one that would be picking up the new cities.
I understand. Let's talk about the new Senate, because it's a very different Senate than it was in 2010 after that election. There were 15 Republican senators in 2010 out of 40. Now there's 11.
There's 11.
It's a 2/3 supermajority for the Democrats. How is that?
Well,
yikes.
I'm not very encouraged as being a Republican. We're at the very beginning of the session. The biggest question is, will the Democrats overreach? And will they go too far?
But let me ask you, I mean, you have been known as someone who is friendly with the other side of the aisle. Will you be able to use those friendships to remain relevant? I mean, that's the only way I can say it.
Well, that's my hope. And I think what the play really is having the Republicans working with the moderate Democrats.
And in the Senate, I would argue there seems to be many.
There are.
More than the Assembly.
And
arguably.
we could actually make some significant strides if we work with the moderate Democrats to stop some very egregious legislation that I'm sure will come, and perhaps get some work done working closely with them.
And have you spoken with those mods yet? Because look, we're in the session. I mean, it started. You know, the budget has already been presented.
Right.
Are you?
The dialogue is starting, absolutely. And I think the moderate Democrats are very concerned because they're in very vulnerable seats themselves.
Of course.
And if they don't work with the Republicans, when they're up for re-election, it could backfire on them.
When we come back, I want to speak with you about an epidemic that has hit Orange County, but it's really systemic. It's not just Orange County. You want to talk about it, I do too. Her name is Mimi Walters. She's a member of the California State Senate. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our California channel viewers, we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're speaking with Mimi Walters, and you have brought me a DVD. The cover is promising, but the content's deafening and devastating. This is a DVD, a documentary called Behind the Orange Curtain. We chuckle about that term, but in this case, it means so much more.
My office was contacted by a gentleman and by a woman who's very involved in this film. And the epidemic is about prescription drugs. And teenagers specifically today are taking prescription drugs. They're having these parties where they take prescription drugs and they put them into a big bowl and they just take the pills. And it's killing people.
My father is a pharmacist, and it is amazing how often I hear about break-ins into pharmacies. The cash registers are left wide open with cash in them. They don't even go to the cash registers, right to the pills.
Right.
Right to the pills. It's heartbreaking.
Well, the problem is too, is the kids don't understand that this is dangerous. They think that because it's prescription drugs, because doctors are the ones prescribing them, that it's okay. And it's not okay.
They have no idea about dosing. They have no idea that younger bodies are different than adult bodies. They may be teenagers, but they're still developing. They don't know about mixing alcohol and marijuana and pills. I mean, it breaks your heart. What did you learn by speaking with the filmmakers, by watching this DVD?
That it was such a big epidemic. And I'm a mom of 4 kids. And
that age.
That age.
Right.
And I'm pretty in tune as to what's going on, I thought, until I sat down and watched this. Now, I have 2 kids in college and I have 2 at home in high school. And I sat down and watched this video with my sons. And my sons actually knew some of the kids in this film because they've been going around to the schools and trying to educate the children about prescription drugs.
I have to tell you, I think back to when I was in high school, when we were in high school. I mean, admittedly, there's something different about a pill than other consumables. Like you said, you feel as if, oh, it's legal.
Yeah, so it's okay. And unfortunately, the parents are not aware as to what's going on. I mean, you have a lot of parents who have prescription drugs in their medicine cabinets, and the kids go in and they take the pills, and the parents might not even realize it. And so what we need to do, in addition to educating the children, is we need to educate the parents. And that's what we hope to do.
Is there anything that can be done legislatively? I mean, I'm not, we don't necessarily need a nanny state, but still. I mean, these are lives that are being lost.
Yeah. We're actually, my office is looking into it, working with the people that I sat down and talked to. We need to have some sort of checks and balances. If people, they doctor shop. So they go from doctor to doctor to doctor to get prescription drugs. Well, we don't have any real mechanism in place to see if people are doing that. And so what we need to look is we need some sort of checks and balances so we make it more difficult for people to have access to prescription drugs, especially if they have a history of abusing them.
And what's also frightening is that so often the parents living in well-heeled communities will presume, oh, it would never happen in my neighborhood.
Right.
And yet, you have hillbilly heroin right in the middle of Dallas, Texas. You have hillbilly heroin right in the middle of Los Angeles or Irvine or wherever it may be. It's happening everywhere. It's not just impoverished communities.
And I think one of the reasons that Behind the Orange Curtain started was because we started to see so many deaths in Orange County of young people taking prescription drugs. And so trying to heighten awareness of it, and now it's getting out of control, and we really need to do something about it.
What did your children say at the end of this movie?
Well, they're scared, and they tell me it happens. They've seen it, and I think it made them more aware not to ever do it, never take prescription drugs unless they actually are prescribed the drug for a reason. And I think that the message got across to them what could actually happen to you if you take the drugs. I mean, they have kids that are interviewed on this video that actually almost OD'd, and now they're not completely normal. Right. Yeah, because of the effects of the drugs, and that had a powerful impact on my boys.
I have to tell you, I am so glad that you brought this to our attention, because so often we get lost in the intricacies of the budget debate or taxes, but these are lives. And I'm glad to see a mother in the Senate looking into important issues like this.
We can never forget, those of us who are parents, our #1 job is to parent our children.
Her name is Mimi Walters, member of the California State Senate. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you for watching California Edition.
On average, how many constituents does a California state senator serve under the 2012 districts? 855,000, 905,000, 930,000, or 1,050,000? The California Citizen Redistricting Commission strived to make each Senate districts include 931,349 residents.
It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Glad you're with us. Our guest, Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly and now part of a super minority. I gotta say, I was a bit surprised in November. I did think the Democrats would take a 2/3 majority in the Senate. I did not expect it in the Assembly. Every close race went the Democrats' way. What happened?
Well, it did, and it was very disappointing. I think there were several things, not the least of which was a strong Democrat president running here in California. Brought out a lot of voters. The governor's tax initiative brought out a lot of voters. And also Prop 32, which dealt with the unions, I think brought out a lot of voters, and overwhelming, they just basically overwhelmed some of our candidates in tougher races.
But what does that say, though? I mean, this is the state that gave the nation Ronald Reagan, gave the nation Richard Nixon. Forget his foibles. I mean, he was a popular president at one time. I mean, this was... And
we gave Proposition 13 and some realistic tax reform. What it says is the Republican Party, and we are doing this, we're doing this at the legislative level, we're doing this out at the grassroots, need to step back and take a look, not, in my view, not so much at our message, but as the way we frame the message. Our tone has been a little harsh. I mean, everybody recognizes that, and it's unnecessary, and it's not productive, and it's not reflective of what Republicans truly believe.
I mean, if you look at the numbers for President Obama, he took over 70% of the Asian American vote, the Latino vote, the Jewish American vote. He took over 90% of the African American vote. I mean, these are growing constituencies. Asian Americans. I mean, Asian Americans had been diehard Republicans for decades. Even Cuban Americans started to swing towards the Democrats. Like you said, there's an issue here. There's a real fundamental issue.
There is, and what has happened, I think, unfortunately, is that we've allowed ourselves in the Republican Party to be caricatured and to have the press, which is interested in some of the progressive ideas proposed by the Democrats. They're not interested in getting the message out as clearly and as articulately as we would like them to. But it is our problem, no question about it, and we need to reframe our message.
When you have the standard bearer of the Republican Party, Mitt Romney, talking about self-deportation, that's not going to play well in California. It's just not going to.
Oh, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't. And I mean, I have made sure when I'm out on the campaign trail, I am telling people in no uncertain terms that not only are we not going to deport the roughly 12 million undocumented workers who are here, we shouldn't. That's not what this country is about. We are not about dividing families up. We're not about taking mom and dad and shipping them back to whatever country they've come from. We have got to make sure that everyone in these communities recognizes we're for empowering them, not deporting.
But here's the challenge. The National Republican Party has come out against the DREAM Act, has come out strongly against President Obama's executive action to help children brought here as minors without their consent.
And what we don't hear, though, is that President Obama and the current administration has deported a whole lot more people than the Bush administration ever did.
Over 8 years.
The facts on the ground are, in my mind, that the Republican Party has the right message in terms of empowering
Think about family values. I mean, I would think Latino Americans would really take a kind look at the sense of whatever family values means to us. But you know what I'm getting at. I mean, that sense of faith.
And you are exactly right. And we ought be better able to reach into those communities. And from what I'm hearing, and we've done an enormous amount of research the last couple of months, is that a lot of us are simply not getting out into the Latino communities and some of the other ethnic communities to take our message. We need to do that better.
Okay.
It's on us.
His name is Don Wagner. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our viewers on the California channel, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Mr. Wagner, I want to speak with you about education. You mentioned Prop 30, and as you know, the voters surprisingly passed Prop 30. I have to admit, I've said this on the air, I didn't think it was going to pass. And the Republican Party came out against Prop 30, but it did pass. What's your sense of that?
Well, I will share with you the surprise. Yes. The polls until the very last indicated it wasn't going to pass. it passed. It's
By
the
a lot.
It did, and it's the law of the state of California, and now we need to make the best of it. One of the things the Republicans have proposed to help make the best of Prop 30 is Assembly Bill 67. Assembly Bill 67 says the governor campaigned on a 7-year tax increase to go to education. We're going to hold them to that promise. In AB 67, we are freezing tuition at the UCs and the CSUs for the entire 7 years of Proposition 30. So to parents, if that is something that caused you to vote for Prop 30, you're worried about the ability of you and your family to finance tuition, AB 67 is going to hold the Democrats to those promises.
Let me say this, that feels good. It feels really good to know that. The challenge becomes is you talk about Al Gore's lockbox. You're putting money in a lockbox, and let's hope that the next 7 years are as positive as we want them to be, and we can freeze tuitions. But do we really want to tie our wrists on that one?
Here's the issue on that, Brad. There isn't a lockbox. They promised a lockbox,
right?
But what they did is and I'm on the budget committee, so I saw this up close and personal. They set up a separate account that they tell you is supposed to function like a lockbox, but really it's just another line item in the general fund. AB 67 says, you promised the people this, we want to hold you to that.
But you're creating an effective lockbox by saying tuitions must be frozen in 7 years.
That is exactly what we were trying to do.
But that, to me, that seems like not the smartest budgetary move, because what if something happens? I mean,
if something happens, this is statutory. If there is an emergency, if something happens, it can be undone. And if there is an emergency, I'm certain the Republicans will come, as well as the public will come to I am absolutely certain, if there's an emergency. What we don't want is those funds that were promised to education to go into what they really will and are intended to go into, and that is growing some of the social services without growing them smartly, without responding to real need, just pumping more money into it.
What about realignment, though? I mean, part of Prop 30 was to give funds to the counties to handle realignment. Is that part of this formula? Is AB 67 recognizing that some of those funds need to go to the prisons and can't be used to freeze tuition?
Oh, absolutely, because the amount of the tuition is below the new Prop 30 monies that's coming in. There is excess money that's supposed to go to public safety. Republicans don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think realignment is going to be and prove to be a disaster for this state. That said, it needs to be. We need to fund public safety. That's one of the things the government legitimately does, is public safety. We need to fund it. AB 67 doesn't interfere with that, because those were the two components: education and public safety. What we're saying on the education side is, don't use the education money for something that is not education related, because that's just a bait and switch to the taxpayer.
Do you believe Governor Brown when he says that the California state budget is balanced or even in the black?
The answer is yes, if all the assumptions the governor's office comes up with in fact prove to come true.
Okay.
And that's a problem with any budgeting. It's always based on assumptions. The legislative analyst's office says it's not quite it's not quite balanced. My guess is some of those assumptions are rosy, but I will give the governor credit. This budget is a whole lot better than budgets that I've seen just in my last 2 years in the legislature.
And speaking of giving credit, like you had said, the Democrats did very well on election night. Yes. So my question for you, though, is how do you make yourself relevant, both specifically and as a member of the Republican caucus, as a member of this super minority?
Great question. We're early in the legislative session. It's going to depend on how things play out. But here's what I see happening. There are a lot of new Democrats up here, and they are all going to be facing a lot of pent-up pressure from their constituencies to deliver mostly on dollar items, new social programs, et cetera. The governor has, to his credit, said he is going to be very responsible with the budget. The speaker, to his credit, has said he is going to be very responsible with the budget. So what I think will end up happening is they will face an enormous amount of pressure from some of their new members. Republicans will be there to work with the moderates and to work with them to keep things on an even keel.
His name is Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. We thank you for watching California Edition.